Esther will always cry, shouting, "Daddy, please! Daddy, please! Daddy, stop! Daddy!" You are watching Tales by Kelechi. In a small village called Kuma, there lived a girl named Esther. Esther was a beautiful 7-year-old girl when her parents died in the village. She had no one ready to take care of her. And after a long meeting and argument by her uncles, they decided to take her to the city to stay with her auntie, Mrs. Ruth. Mrs. Ruth was married to Mr. Samuel, and for years they didn't have any child. And now, since Esther is here, they decided to take her in as their own child to love and care for her. Esther was a very beautiful girl who had a beautiful smile. But unfortunately, she never got to smile again because she was not happy in her new parents' home. It all began one day when Esther was in her room and her father, Mr. Samuel, walked in and said to her, "Esther, my child, I want to show you what it means to be a woman, but you must not tell it to anybody. It is a secret. Make sure you don't tell anyone." Little Esther did not know what her father was saying, but she trusted him. Of course, it is her father, and she trusted whatever her father said. Mr. Samuel, her supposed father, started having intimacy with 7-year-old Esther. He forced himself on the little girl, and she will always cry, shouting, "Daddy, please stop! Daddy, stop! It's paining me! Daddy, it's scary!" But Mr. Samuel would not listen. Esther didn't understand what was happening. She only felt a sharp pain down below that scared her, and it was hurting her. She ran away most times, but Mr. Samuel always catched up with her. At 7 years, Esther was already traumatized. You must be wondering where Mrs. Ruth, her mother, had been all this while. Stick with me. Ruth owned a very big shop in the city. She owned the biggest clothing brand in the city, where everyone comes to buy from her at wholesale prices. She was always in her shop. She was so into her business that she never cared to know what was happening in her home. Mr. Samuel, on the other hand, was a man who worked from home creating websites for companies. So he had more time to commit the atrocities he was committing because he was always at home alone with his daughter Esther. One day, Mrs. Ruth was sitting in the dining table calculating and counting her money as usual. That is all she cared about. Then Esther walked up to her and said, "Mommy, why does Daddy always hurt me when you are not around?" Esther's voice was so small and trembling, but her mother, Mrs. Ruth, didn't even look from the pile of papers spread across the dining table. She was very busy, always focused on her shop and money. Nothing else mattered to her. She responded to Esther's question. "Esther, please, not now." As she flipped through the ledger, her attention was fixed on the numbers. "Can't you see I am busy? You know how hard I work to make sure we have enough. Just go and do your homework." "But Mom," Esther said again, her voice already cracking as she stood there, clutching the hem of her shirt, desperate for someone to listen to her. Esther said, "Mommy," and Mrs. Ruth said to her, "I said I am busy." She snapped, finally looking into her eyes, flashing with impatience. "You always bring up silly things when I'm trying to work. Go to your room." Esther swallowed her hard words, dying in her throat. She wanted to scream to beg her mother to hear her, but she knew it was pointless. Her mother never listened. never seemed to care about anything but her shop. So Esther turned quietly and went into her room. Her heart was heavy with the secret she was forced to carry alone. Mr. Samuel continued to sneak into Esther's room every night, and whenever Mrs. Ruth went to the shop, he always had his way into his daughter's room. He would always tell Esther to keep it a secret and that he was trying to make her feel like a woman. And Esther would always say, "Daddy, but it's always painful and I don't like it. I am going to tell mommy." And her father would always shout at her, "Esther, if you ever tell anybody, you will die. Do you want to die?" And out of fear, Esther will say, "No." She will keep quiet and keep it to herself, but deep down she needed someone to talk to. She needed attention. She needed someone to express her pains and her feelings to. She wanted to talk to her mother, but her mother never gave her a listening ear. It was as if she was all alone in the world. Her father, who was supposed to be protecting her, was committing all of